Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, I'm actually cooking right now, and I have like a half hour, so I have a very tight window to do this. Um, but I haven't recorded one of these in over a month because I was in Japan. I will make another one of these soon and talk about my trip. It was awesome. Not so awesome as the fact that I haven't been paid in like 6 pay cycles, and I made the plans to go there before I knew I wasn't going to get paid. And I got some non-refundable tickets and hotel room and stuff like this. And finally I just decided I haven't gone on a vacation in a couple years, and I'm gonna do it and put it all on credit cards. But now, of course, I'm back and I've got literally just like a couple $100 worth of room on my credit cards. So pretty soon, if I don't get paid, that's going to end badly. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, I will talk more about that later. I'm not, obviously I put myself in that situation, although there's a lot of stuff to talk about there. But what I want to talk about today is I just saw two stories in Arizona Central. Today, when I'm recording this, is the 21st of January 2023, which is insane. One of these stories was Reuben Gallego. Well, actually, I guess the first one that I saw was Greg Stanton isn't going to run for the Arizona Senate seat in 2024. There was some speculation that he might. The second one, totally coincidental, was that Reuben Gallego is going to announce his run in about a week. And I'll tell you what, I didn't see that one until after I already told the person who shared the Stanton one with me this, but it annoys the shit out of me because I swear, and this is not like a weird conspiracy theory or this is pretty much just how the party operates. I swear what has happened is that behind closed doors, Gallego has gone to people higher up in the party and kind of they've decided basically he's going to be the nominee. And they talked to Stanton and said, yeah, and I'm not a fan of Stanton's, to be fair. I'd vote for him before I'd vote for Gallego by a lot, but I'm not a fan. But I'm sure they talked to him and they're like, well, this is Gallego's thing. So you probably don't want to run unless you don't want to have any support from the party. Because this is what they do again. They sort of decide the elections. I mean, it doesn't always work, but they decide who gets which seat before the election even happens, or before people even announce. So probably won't see a very competitive race, I would guess. I'm just gonna, I'm just making wild speculations here before the announcement's even made. But I'm guessing we won't see some well-known competitor go up against Gallego. I'm guessing maybe there will be somebody else that runs or a couple of other people in the primary, but they'll be at best get 20% and not be competitive. They won't be really well known. They won't be really plugged into the party. Because again, I think behind closed doors, they kind of decided this. It's the same shit that they did to decide that Sinema was going to get the seat, incidentally, and it's also why I fucking hate it. Because Gallego, not as bad as Sinema, but I gotta tell you, and I used to like the guy, and I do understand, there's a certain thing, by the time people get to this level, they're either already shitheads who weaseled their way in, or they become shitheads. Either way, I don't know, I don't care. But the problem is, a while back, I read about the divorce that happened between Reuben and his wife, the current mayor of, ex-wife, I should say, the current mayor of Phoenix. Sounds like he was kind of a shithead and did not leave a good impression on me. Made me decide I never want to vote for the guy, and also made me decide he's not the person who should be representing me in the Senate. I'm not saying that he's not a move up from Sinema, but a lump of shit. He's like the Joe Biden versus Trump. Yeah, he's better than Trump, but so would a lump of shit be. He's better than she is, but only marginally. And only because she's so fucking horrible. And I loathe this. This is why politics sucks. I mean, there are a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons that it sucks is that you have people making these kinds of decisions, and we don't actually have, I mean, we have the illusion of a free and fair election. And I don't think people are actually like manipulating votes per se. So it is technically free. It's not like somebody's actually cheating. But it's also set up so that the people who are in a position to be competitive, the people who have the organization, who have connections to donors who could make them potentially, a viable candidate, all of them are plugged into this system that is basically going to say, like, you're not going to fucking run without, or if you try, you're going to face massive consequences, which is not cool. It's not, and then you end up with shitheads. This is how Sinema's in office. It's how Biden's in office. Frankly, it's how Hillary got to be the nominee. And, again, I campaigned and voted for her. I voted for Sinema a couple of times. I voted for, like, a lot of shitty people. I voted for Biden. But it sucks because you get in this position over and over again, perpetually, where it's like, okay, you have unbelievably horrible person like McSally or Trump or people of this nature. And then you have somebody who's also pretty shitty, who on an absolute scale, you would not trust to do anything. I wouldn't want Reuben Gallego picking up dog shit in my yard. Like, honestly, I would not. I have a negative opinion of him that is sufficient that I don't see him doing that as a positive thing. I don't want him to be my fucking senator. I don't, and it's just loathsome to me that this is the way things go. And I just feel like I felt compelled to record this because it just, it makes me rip out my fucking hair. I see the thing happening, and you can tell how it's going to happen. And I wanted to record this because if a couple weeks from now I say, like, oh, this is what happened, it's a little bit less credible than, oh, this is what is happening right now. And what is, this is a little bit of a prognostication, and at least that is falsifiable to some extent. Like, you can't go and figure out, oh yeah, the chair of the party and these other people talked together and decided Gallego is going to do this, and they talked to Stanton and whoever else was thinking about they might run, and they said, you don't want to do it. I can't prove any of that stuff, but I can tell you my prediction. Gallego announces. The day that he announces, the moment that he announces, he magically has, just like Mark Kelly, just like Sinema, has a huge pool of people making those initial donations, donations in air quotes, and legalized bribes. And I would almost wager, this is getting into like vaguely conspiratorial thinking, but I wouldn't be that shocked if it turned out that a lot of his donors overlap with a lot of Sinema's donors. And she and he are even kind of like in the back room, kind of going like, hey, I want to go do this other thing. And he's like, yeah. And I don't know. That one I'd say is a lower probability, but it wouldn't shock me. But definitely, I do think he's going to be the probable nominee, and we won't see anyone who's competitive. It's not to say that you can't get someone coming completely out of left field and doing it, and we need that person. I wish that I would love to have that person, because if you don't have that, then you end up with the same shit that you just continually get, and then people who get in the position, like in this country, we have 100 people in the Senate who can do something. We have 435 people in the House who can do something. You have a couple of other people at the top. And other than that, most of us are just like, the most I can do is write a strongly worded letter, or maybe a letter to the editor, maybe like complain here, complain on Instagram, or when I was on Twitter, I could complain there. But that's it. I don't have any actual power. You probably didn't. Unless you're one of the 0.000 whatever 1%, you who are listening to me or watching me have no power to do anything. And we just get the same crappy, like people who do this shit all the fucking time over and over again. And it's annoying, and I hate it. And the longer we do it, just the more people believe voting doesn't matter, the more people believe elections don't matter. Because partly you're telling them it doesn't matter because you're giving these people the nomination without any kind of a race. And also partly because there are people who are interested in kind of selling that story. And it's not true, obviously. Like if it didn't matter, people wouldn't try so hard to take it away from you and to discourage you from doing it. But there's an element of truth to it, which is, yeah, it matters because you don't want to get Trump in there. But it also kind of doesn't matter because the alternatives are shitty. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge, well, former huge fan of the Squad. And I see in these votes, everybody's voting for Pelosi in a different body. Pelosi's mind transferred into her protege, Jeffries. And probably a worse, like if it's possible to be worse than Pelosi, he's probably going to be it. And I keep seeing like AOC and these people who I once respected going like, oh, we're all unified on the Democratic side and making fun of the Republicans for not voting for a complete shithead, but who ended up getting the chair, the speaker seat. Anyway, so a lot of good that whole situation did. But bragging that the Democrats are aligned behind Pelosi or Jeffries or people like this, it's not encouraging. All it does is tell me that through whatever process it works, which I assume is just, like there's so much structural kind of soft power baked into the system that if you actually got to the House and you wanted to go against Pelosi, like really butt heads with her, or now Jeffries, it's like you could try, but you're going to probably end your political career. And people see that. And they also see, I mean, frankly, this is one reason why for the longest time I was kind of on AOC's side and the Squad's side, is just that, you have a bunch of people who were formerly supporters who just abandoned them. And then, if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, I'm here kind of on my own, and I have one group who I can't count on, and then I have the people who are here who actually have power and who can help me. It's a rational decision. In addition to just, being the person who gets elected and gets into those seats, it kind of indicates that you're that sort of person. Now I will say, possible future senator in California taking Feinstein's seat, Katie Porter, seems to be pretty good. In fact, as soon as I heard that she was going to run for that seat, I got really excited. And then almost immediately, just like to punch me in the stomach and twist the knife, Katie Porter does some bullshit they call them first responders, but basically like cop veneration post on her Instagram. And I fucking hate it. Like, I know why people don't think all cops are bastards. And I know people who are cops. They seem like nice people in real life. I get why, if it's your dad or your brother or your uncle or whoever, and you think that, oh, Tom's not a bastard. Why would you call him a bastard, Scott? But the problem is, when they're cops, I mean, first off, a lot of people just inherently are bastards. They're attracted to that. So initially you have that. But even the people who are not individually as human beings bastards, they get into the system, and the system almost demands that they be bastards. This is the same problem with fucking politicians, because like maybe one day AOC wasn't so bad. Maybe maybe any of these people once were actually okay and good people, and they would have been aligned with me in a lot of things. But they get in there, and the machinery basically compels them to be bastards. I'm not saying that all representatives are bastards, not the same level, although it's a different, they're not murdering people, they're just, I mean, well, it's an interesting thing. Empirically, are they murdering people? Probably, in terms of statistics, they're killing more people than cops, this is kind of weird thing, but because they're letting people die from lack of health care and die of poverty and all of this kind of stuff, maybe they are murdering more people. So I guess maybe, but I fucking despise being in the position where you're kind of going like, well, all these politicians suck, because it's not productive and I don't think it's true. But at the same time, there's enough truth to it and enough evidence that people get in there and then they turn to shit, or they were always shit and you didn't know it. And it's just disgusting. It irritates the shit out of me. And it's also annoying. Like I've seen enough from when I tried to run. You go into these LD meetings and you see the party and the structure and kind of the way the system is and operates, and it's gross, and you can see also like, okay, well, if you wanted to operate in that system, these are the things you'd have to do. And the problem is, of course, you start going to those LD meetings and you start meeting people and you start networking and building up cred, so to speak, and eventually you get in the position where maybe you can run for office, maybe you can run for a state senate, or you run for some local thing. And then you start inching your way up, and then you get to where they start considering to like, maybe you're okay to run for this congressional seat. Which is not to say that you have to, like, you can obviously decide arbitrarily and independently, oh, I'm going to run for this congressional seat, but you're going to have a hard time. Not to say that you can't do it, but if you don't have a network and a lot of money and a lot of other resources, you're gonna struggle. And you have to have a lot of things working for you. So totally doable, but it's a challenge. But if you go through that system and you get to the point where they're actually going like, okay, well, we'll endorse you and all of this, which is another thing that annoys the shit out of me, because I'm a fan of Planned Parenthood. Tomorrow is the 50th, I think it's tomorrow. There's a rally for it. I don't know if it's the exact day of the 50th anniversary of Roe, which not shockingly got overturned because you kind of never codified it into law, never passed a constitutional amendment and made it trivial for people to take over the Supreme Court and then do whatever they wanted. And that was one of the things that they wanted and one of the things they used for leverage. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent of a tangent. But it's just one of these things where you look at that, and if you've gone through that system and you've gone through that process, you've made such an investment in getting to the position where you could run for office, and you've done the call times, and you're sucking up the donors and you're going to all these things. And at a certain point, I think people get in a position and they're like, okay, well, I've done all this. I'm just going to go a little bit more. I'm just going to do a little bit more. I'm just going to suck up a little bit more to the rich donors, or I'm just gonna bow to whoever has power to get a little, and I'm sure they tell themselves at some point, as soon as I get to this position, I'm gonna do something. And then they get to that position and it's that thing, like you might not walk all the way over there, you might not go to that extreme right now, but you'll take that little step, and you'll take the next little step, and you take the next little step. And then the next thing you know, somebody's got their knee on somebody's neck, they're dying, and you're sitting there just watching, and you're not gonna save their life because congratulations, you too have become a bastard. That's the way a lot of these things go, and it really is the system that compels people as much as the system is composed of individuals, obviously. But it's that collective action of individuals operating in that system which reinforces it and which makes it almost impossible to go against it. Similarly to why so many people are, people on YouTube, they all have their personal brand and they're all trying to find a way to make money, and they're like, oh, look at the Square, our sponsor for this video, Squarespace, and not a sponsor, but yeah, they're doing this shit. The reason that they do that is because the system compels it. Like, you have to be a very weird person to be like me, just doing this and not having even the aspiration or the thought or the desire to do that, because the system compels you to do it. You have to exist in the world. You have to eat, you have to feed yourself, you have to house yourself. And all of these things kind of work to provide this kind of mean field that pushes you in a certain way and makes you make rational decisions. And a bunch of people are making these same kinds of rational decisions independently, and they all do the same kind of thing. And it's this kind of conspiracy without conspirators thing. It's just like there's a flow, and when you're in that flow, it's really hard to go against. It's almost impossible to go against it. Or if you do go against it, there are going to be consequences, potentially really bad consequences. Anyway, with that, I am going to have a very loud beep in a couple minutes. So I think I'm going to break before that happens. I will be back soon to talk a little bit about Japan, and also when I came back to this country after being in Japan for a month, and in addition to just not seeing people here masking at all. I mean, people do mask, but it's like the exception of the exception, versus there, everybody does it and it's not a big deal, other than like the American tourists that come in and they're coughing and they're sick and not masking because they're complete assholes. But aside from just that, you come back and you see, I went to LA. Maybe LA was not the best place to get reintroduced to the country, but I'm there and there are, you see poor people, you see all of this economic disparity, you see super wealthy people right next to people who are highly impoverished and unhoused and all this kind of stuff. And all I could think was, when I was a kid, I went on a cruise with my dad not too long before he died. And one of the places we went was Caracas. And in Caracas, we drove into a neighborhood and you see these crazy mansions that make Beverly Hills look pretty modest. And right across the street, the hills are just filled with people with improvised housing, shacks, and all of this. And you think, like, how can you live in those mansions looking at that and be okay with yourself and not try to change things? And of course, again, the system, is the answer. Or that system, not that it's one system, but it's like a big collective systematic thing. But also, that same feeling is what I had when I came back here. And I'm not saying by any means that Japan is perfect. Like, there are a lot of problems there. But this is something that is particularly fucked up in our country. And it's not just the healthcare, it's not just the inequity and the income inequality and all of this. And again, it's funny that I'm talking about politicians and the police, because these things are deeply interwoven with this. And the fact that, like, LA is a democratic city in a democratic state, which is much, and again, I'm not saying they're worse than the Republicans, who are even worse, but the cops murder people regularly, including black cops. Race doesn't help you here. It's interesting how even if you're, in the oppressed group, you can get into a position of power and you become, because of the system, a bastard. You become part of that thing that is doing the oppression. And it's tragic. And I'm not saying it's not escapable, because I do think things, geology, time and pressure can do things. And then also things happen slowly and then all at once. Things do build up and then fracture. It's like punctuated equilibrium. Things do kind of like build and change very seismically and very quickly. So it can happen. But in the meantime, it sucks. With that, thank you very much. I'll be back hopefully in a few days. We'll see. But, 再见.